In a quiet town nestled along the Oregon coast, 78-year-old Samuel Carter begins each morning with a brisk walk and a clear mind. Tall and spry, with piercing blue eyes and silver hair slicked neatly to the side, Samuel defies the stereotype of what old age should look like. His neighbors often wonder how he maintains such remarkable vitality, still gardening, writing short stories, and volunteering at the local community center. Many assume it's just good genetics, but Samuel's secret lies elsewhere. What most overlook is a surprisingly powerful, yet deeply neglected aspect of men's health: sexual well-being. While his peers struggle with fatigue, memory lapses, and emotional withdrawal, Samuel has made it a personal priority to stay intimately connected with both his partner and himself. He believes this connection fuels his longevity, sharpness, and zest for life. It's not about youth, he says. It's about staying in touch with who you are, body and soul. This is not a story about medicine or miracle diets. It's a story about reclaiming vitality through something simple, natural, and too often stigmatized. And Samuel's journey may just change how we view aging forever. Doctors are finally speaking out. This is why so many seniors don't live past 80. It's not genetics. It's not bad luck. It's a common mistake that thousands of older adults make every day. And most don't even realize it. But you can avoid it. Press 1 now to hear the warning signs, straight from doctors and older adults who've lived through it. Their advice could add years to your life or your loved ones. Don't wait until it's too late. Press 1 for the truth. For most of his life, Samuel Carter had never thought much about aging. He assumed it would come slowly, quietly, like fog rolling in over the coastal cliffs near his home. But around his 65th birthday, something shifted. The energy he once took for granted began to fade. He felt slower, less motivated, and worst of all, disconnected from himself. What began as occasional fatigue quickly turned into sleepless nights, aching joints, and an overwhelming sense of emotional detachment. He brushed it off at first. It's just getting old, he told himself. But when he stopped feeling desire, not just sexually, but for life itself, Samuel began to worry. He no longer looked at his wife, Amelia, the way he used to. He didn't laugh at the same jokes or wake up excited for the day. It wasn't depression. It was something deeper, a fading sense of identity. Then one afternoon, he had a heart-to-heart with an old friend, Caleb, a retired psychologist who'd noticed Samuel's change. "You're not losing yourself," Caleb said. "You're disconnecting from something essential. Your sexuality. It's more than sex, Sam. It's life force." The words lingered in Samuel's mind for days. Could it really be that simple? Could his decline be tied to a part of himself he had quietly let go of? Out of curiosity, Samuel began reading research articles, medical journals, and stories of other men who experienced similar struggles. The science was compelling. Sexual activity, even in the form of self-pleasure, stimulated the brain, improved blood circulation, and maintained hormone levels like testosterone. It wasn't about being youthful. It was about staying engaged, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Samuel decided to reclaim that part of himself. He started slowly, talking openly with Amelia about his fears, his body, and their intimacy. He introduced small routines to reconnect: gentle touch, eye contact, slow breathing, shared moments of closeness without pressure. And something remarkable happened. He began to feel alive again. The man who once stared blankly at his garden but for life. That moment, when he realized that reclaiming his sexuality was a path to reclaiming himself, was the turning point. It wasn't about vanity or performance. It was about honoring the full range of being human at any age. Just as Samuel Carter was beginning to feel renewed, stronger, more grounded, more connected to his wife, life threw him a jarring curveball. One chilly December morning, while stacking firewood outside their cabin, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. It was sudden, stabbing, and it forced him to sit down, breathless, on the porch steps. Amelia rushed to his side. The ambulance came quickly. At the hospital, after a series of tests, the doctor delivered the words Samuel hadn't expected to hear. "You didn't have a heart attack, but you were dangerously close. Your blood pressure's been high, your circulation's weak. You need to make some serious changes." Samuel sat in silence. He'd already made some changes. He had been reconnecting with himself, with Amelia. Was it not enough? The fear crept back in. Was it too late? That night, lying awake in the sterile hospital bed, Samuel replayed the doctor's words in his mind. And then a nurse named Grace, a soft-spoken woman in her 40s, sat beside him for a midnight check-in. She looked over his chart, then back at him. "You know," she said gently, "your vitals aren't terrible, but they show a man who's still holding stress in his body. And that kind of stress, emotional, sexual, existential, doesn't show up in labs, but it shows up in the heart." He stared at her, startled by the truth in her voice. "Most men your age," she continued, "don't realize how closely the heart and the mind and the body's deepest needs are connected. You can take pills and eat well, but if you shut down parts of who you are, it all suffers." Her words pierced through the fear. He hadn't been too late, but he hadn't gone far enough. The next morning, Samuel made a decision. He wouldn't just dabble in recovery, he would dive in completely. He began to treat his emotional health with the same urgency as his physical. He spoke to a therapist. He and Amelia started weekly intimacy exercises recommended by a counselor. They stopped rushing. They laughed more. He cried, something he hadn't done in over a decade. What surprised Samuel most wasn't the tenderness. It was how quickly his body responded. Within weeks, his blood pressure lowered, his sleep deepened, and most importantly, he no longer feared dying, because now he was finally living. After his scare and the honest conversation with Nurse Grace, something inside Samuel Carter shifted. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't loud, but it was powerful, like the turning of a tide. For most of his life, Samuel had subscribed to the quiet script society hands to older men. Grow old, fade out, become invisible. Aging, he had believed, was a process of surrender. But in the quiet moments after his return home from the hospital, he began to question everything. Why had he believed that sexual desire was something that expired with time? Why did he feel embarrassed for still wanting connection, for still feeling attraction, for still craving touch? Was it shame, conditioning, or simply silence? No one had ever told him it was okay to still be a sensual, emotional, alive human being at 78. He began journaling daily, just 10 minutes in the morning, and one day he wrote something that stopped him cold. What if aging isn't about letting go of who I was, but embracing more of who I am? That single thought rewired how he saw everything. He stopped thinking of his body as failing and started seeing it as transforming. Yes, it required more patience. Yes, it moved slower, but it also offered started noticing the smallest pleasures, the way her fingers traced circles on his back, the warmth of her breath on his neck, the intimacy of shared silence. These weren't substitutes for youth. They were revelations of a deeper kind of intimacy. He also began speaking openly, with his sons, his neighbors, even a group of men from his church. At first it was uncomfortable, but to his surprise, many of them leaned in. They had been holding the same fears, the same questions, the same quiet yearning to be seen not just as old men, but as whole men. Samuel realized something profound. Aging isn't a disappearance. It's a return to truth, to authenticity, to vulnerability, and most unexpectedly, to pleasure. What changed for Samuel wasn't just his health or his habits, it was his mindset. He no longer saw aging as the enemy. He saw it as an invitation, not to fight against time, but to move with it, wisely, deeply, and fully. And with that shift, the fog lifted. With his new perspective came a new sense of purpose. Samuel Carter, once content to quietly tend his garden and keep to himself, now felt something stir within him, a drive he hadn't felt in decades. This wasn't about reclaiming youth. It was about creating a new chapter, one filled with meaning, connection, and yes, desire. One morning over breakfast, he turned to Amelia and said, "I think I want to start a group. A real one, for men like me." She looked at him, eyebrows raised. "Like a book club?" He chuckled. "Not quite. I want to talk about the things we're not supposed to talk about. Aging, sexuality, shame, everything we bottle up." And so, over the next few weeks, he got to work. He put up flyers at the local library, chatted with friends at the coffee shop, even made a simple post on the community bulletin board. "Men over 60, let's talk about real life." He didn't know what to expect. Maybe 2 or 3 would show up. But on that first Thursday evening, 12 men filled the back room of the town center. Some widowed, some married, some still quiet with shame. And Samuel began. He shared his story, the numbness, the hospital scare, the tears, the rediscovery of his body and soul. At first no one spoke. Then one man raised his hand, then another, and suddenly the room transformed. Walls dropped, eyes softened, shoulders relaxed. That night, Samuel realized he hadn't just saved himself. He had opened a door for others. The group became a weekly gathering, growing steadily. They shared stories, laughed, cried, even brought in guest speakers, therapists, doctors, intimacy coaches. Word began to spread, and soon the local paper ran a story on the courageous men of Harborview. Samuel was invited to speak at senior centers, health workshops, and even on a regional podcast. Not because he had all the answers, but because he had the courage to ask the right questions. Through this new path, he discovered a calling he never expected, to guide others back to their own vitality. His story was no longer just about reclaiming his health. It was about redefining what it means to age. Samuel didn't set out to become a leader, but in embracing his vulnerability, he had become one. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel old. He felt alive with purpose. By his 79th birthday, Samuel Carter no longer recognized the man he had once been, and that was a good thing. The man who once avoided mirrors now smiled at his reflection, not because he looked younger, but because he felt whole. His back still ached some mornings, and he needed reading glasses more often than not. But none of that defined him anymore. What defined him was his vitality, emotional clarity, and unshakable self-respect. He and Amelia had grown closer than they'd ever been, not just as lovers, but as companions, partners in curiosity. conversations, and deep emotional presence. These moments, Samuel realized, had become their new intimacy. Gentle, electric, sacred. His body had responded to this intentionality. His blood pressure stabilized. His sleep patterns returned. His appetite, both for food and life, rekindled. And something even more surprising happened. He began to forgive himself. He forgave himself for the years he spent in silence, ignoring his emotional needs, for the way he'd numbed himself with distraction instead of connection, for the shame he'd carried, thinking desire had an expiration date. Letting go of that shame was like opening a window in a stuffy room. Suddenly, everything breathed again. In his weekly men's group, he noticed changes too. The other men were standing taller, smiling more. Some brought their partners, some cried freely. The room had become a sanctuary where aging wasn't feared, it was celebrated. But Samuel's growth didn't stop there. He began mentoring younger men, sons of his friends, volunteers at the local clinic, even 20-somethings who stumbled upon his podcast episodes. They came with questions about masculinity, aging, intimacy. And Samuel met them not with advice, but with stories and space. He listened, he encouraged, and he told them something no one had told him when he was younger. You're allowed to feel, you're allowed to want, you're allowed to change. The irony wasn't lost on him, that his greatest growth had come in the age when society said he should be slowing down. But instead of fading out, Samuel was radiating forward. He had grown from a man clinging to routine into one embracing transformation, from isolation into community, from shame into sacred self-expression. And in doing so, Samuel had discovered something timeless. When you choose to live with intention, every stage of life becomes a beginning, not an end. As the sun dipped behind the pine trees that framed his coastal town, Samuel Carter sat on the porch swing, watching the world in golden light. He held a warm cup of tea in one hand, and in the other, Amelia's fingers. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. He had come full circle, but more than that, he had broken the circle. The cycle of shame, silence, and surrender that too often defined aging for men of his generation. Samuel's story was no longer about survival. It was about revival. He had learned that true vitality wasn't found in gym memberships or green smoothies. It was found in honest conversations, emotional courage, and unapologetic self-connection. He had defied expectations, not by pretending to be young, but by fully embracing the richness of age. And in doing so, he redefined what aging could look like, not as decline, but as deepening. More than anything, Samuel became a symbol, not of perfection, but of possibility. His life became a living reminder that it's never too late to reclaim lost parts of yourself, never too late to feel joy, connection, intimacy, never too late to start again. At the local community center, a sign now hung by the door. Welcome. Here, growing older means growing bolder. He hadn't written it. One of the men from his group had. But it made Samuel smile every time he saw it. He had received letters from strangers across the country, men who felt seen for the first time, women who forwarded his story to their husbands, sons, or fathers. Messages filled with tears, laughter, and above all, hope. But the greatest transformation wasn't what others saw. It was what Samuel felt. For the first time in his life, he wasn't performing a role. He was living a truth. Aging hadn't made him smaller. It had freed him. He now greeted each day not with fear, but with gratitude. Not for how many years he had left, but for how deeply he could live the ones that remained. live more fully than ever before. For Samuel, this meant embracing his emotional and sexual self, even when society told him it was too late. He learned that vitality doesn't depend on youth, it depends on engagement. When we choose to stay emotionally, physically, and spiritually connected, we unlock a level of joy and clarity that age cannot touch. The courage to express desire, seek connection, and embrace vulnerability becomes the fuel for true longevity, not just in years, but in meaning. Samuel's journey reminds us that it's never too late to come home to ourselves. Whether you're 40 or 80, the moment you choose to live truthfully is the moment you begin again. Take one simple step today. Start a conversation. Whether it's with your partner, a friend, or even yourself, talk honestly about your needs, your fears, your desires. Silence breeds shame, but sharing brings healing. Next, prioritize small rituals that reconnect you to